hope the audio working. I don't feel like plugging the mic up. All right. So, it's New Year, 2022. I found out some fucked up shit about New Year's, man. Somebody sent me an inbox, and it had some of the history of New Year's, like some of the American history of New Year's and the connection with slavery. I was like, God damn, everything tainted, but that's not what this particular live is about. But I wanted to, it's been difficult lately to speak, mainly because of the weather. The weather make it hard to like set the camera up and sit at the table. It's just too cold to be sitting out. And so that leads to some of the less lives. But also I think after the spring and the summer and all the things that go through some of the city market and just all the things in general, it just get to a point where you just need to take a second collectively and individually to just regroup, and within that time, it's not usually doing a lot of talking. So that's one of the reasons I haven't done a lot of lives and talked about a lot of stuff, is just, the weather in combination with the amount of things that have happened. And, just staying out here regularly is sort of a task within itself. I tried to make sure to do the podcast. We've had the newsletter still coming out different, and that's been something that, somebody else to sort of take the main lead on, and, just other things in general we still continue to do, and be active on social media with posts, and, continuously being down here as different members of the May 30th Alliance that still do court support and different things like that. So, but I said all those things particularly to say that I think it's important at certain points in time to speak and talk about significances, whether it be, from time periods of being out here for like 100 days or 300 days, or, specifically now with being here for 3 calendar years, where came out here at the end of 2020, stayed out here for the entirety of 2021, and now we've begun to be out here, during 2022. And it's been a host of people that have, participated and played parts in us as an organization being able to continue to do that. But I think that one of the things that we've seen out here is the cycles that exist within the city, and the cycles that exist within the county and the area. And even, nationally, you can see these things as well. But to just be diagnosing what it is that we particularly are dealing with. And the cycle that we seen throughout 2021 was that there were multiple high-speed pursuits. One of those high-speed pursuits led to a car accident that led to someone's death. We seen that these high-speed pursuits taking place did not lead to the streets being safer or to traffic being safer because of the amount of car accidents that took place in general last year, in particular fatal car accidents. So we seen that was an unnecessary risk that's being taken. One of the other things we seen last year is at the beginning of last year, in January, Denzel Duvant was assaulted while he was handcuffed by a Rockford Police Department officer. Black man, unarmed, beat up on the west side of Rockford. And then at the end of the year, in December, we seen a picture of a white man who had been assaulted and beat up by the Rockford Police Department. We shared that particular mugshot, on the Facebook page. That wasn't something that was, that didn't become something that was, for whatever reason, spoken about as heavily or as much as the assault of Denzel was spoken about. But it was still, from my understanding and from what I seen, a brutal assault that took place. And then within there, we also seen it was one man who was he was beat up by the South Beloit Police Department. The picture was posted on Rockford Mugshots, and it was a pretty brutal assault. So we see that in that 12-month period that at least 3 people had heavily excessive physical assaults done to them at the hands of the police officers. And in January, when Denzel Duvant was beat, there were no body cameras. In December, when this young white man was beat by the Rockford Police Department, there's body cameras. I don't see any type of action that is being changed or being taken because of body cameras now existing that is going to alleviate the likelihood of a Denzel Duvant happening. Because once somebody got beat up in December, which is one of the things that we said, that if the empathy of and humanity can't, the technology can't exceed people's empathy. And so it don't matter if people got body cameras and somebody get beat up by the police and don't nobody care about it. But anyways, I say that to say that we seen last year that it's a pattern that within a 12-month period, at least 3 times, it's going to be a heavily excessive force used in the form of assaults to citizens. And then we seen in that same time period from January to December, in April, Rockford Police Department shot Jose Gonzalez Jr. while he was running away. In April, Winnebago County Sheriff deputies murdered Faustin Guaitigo inside of his home. In April, the Raymond Jackson was killed, after a high-speed pursuit took place by the Rockford Police Department. And so within that 1 month, 3 of these things took place. 3 of these things happened. And so on average, 2 times a year, there's deadly force used by police officers in Winnebago County. So they did that in April. Both of those, they got their average. And then if you fast forward throughout the year, and this is again outside of Rockford and Winnebago County in particular, but it still goes to point out the issue as a whole. In Beloit, in September, it was a man shot by the police department. DeKalb. DeKalb in September, it was a man shot and killed by the police department. The DeKalb Police Department got body cameras, but there was no heavy story about it. It had a small amount of news traction. This was a white man who was having a mental health crisis. Police came and they killed him. And then just this month in Beloit, it was a Mexican man who was having a mental health crisis who was shot by the Beloit Police Department. And so within that 12-month span, we see just even here in this area, and I particularly pointing out Beloit and DeKalb because those are places that there's a lot of cross-commuting to, that kids grow up here or teenagers are here and they go to school in some of these places, or people drive and have jobs in some of these places. These are places that are, the term community is something that is fluid, depending on the situation. And so I think it's an argument to be made that because what happens in Beloit has some type of actual repercussions here, that's part of, the community, because people that live here have family that live there or go back and forth there because, that makes it important what happens in these areas. And so we see throughout January to December of last year that at least in this area, in a place where people commute back and forth or connect to the Rockford, Winnebago County area, that is shooting in 2 shootings in April, a shooting in September, a shooting in December. 1 for every season on average. That's 4 on average shootings. And 2 people survived, 2 people didn't survive. And then just to extrapolate that out, last year from January 1st to December 31st, 900 people were shot and killed. 900 plus people was shot and killed by police, by law enforcement. And that's outside of people who were shot and survived. That's outside of people who died in high-speed pursuits, or outside of people who died inside of jail or inside of custody. But that's a fact. 900 plus. I wish I had another, 900 plus. So that's on average 3 times a day. And I think the reason it's important to point out specifically these acts. The reason that we have these memorials that's been up, which 2 days ago marks a year having these memorials up. In that time, we've added one memorial since we put it up. When we put these memorials up, we knew that at some point we was gonna have to add more. That's one of the things, that's one of the things too about this year beginning and starting over, is the understanding that it's not even very likely. Statistically, historically, it says that somebody is going to be on one of these other poles down here because of this specific issue, because of this specific problem. And now, I think one of the other things that I feel the need to point out is that same thing goes for a lot of other issues in our society. That's, when a year starts over like this, even though a year starting over ain't an actual blank slate, it's this, we give power to these things and credence to these things as people. Sometimes it helps to have some type of common ground with people. And I think that sometimes a new year does that. But when this year starts off, at the beginning of this year, it will be a police officer who is being charged with child pornography, who is getting paid and will get paid throughout the rest of this year, until the case is over with, until somehow until he is found guilty or take some type of plea, he's gonna get paid. So, and I say that to say this. So when that is something that is happening in an institution that is supposed to be stopping people from having child pornography, what type of legitimacy can that institution truthfully have? The same thing. As this year starts, one of the things the city is going to emphasize and talk about is this Family Peace Center, the Family Peace Center, which is heavily centered on addressing domestic violence within homes in Winnebago County, within, in the area of Winnebago County, domestic violence. And domestic violence is a very important societal issue. And there's a lot of things that need to be addressed and absolved about the roots of domestic violence. But the problem is this city of Rockford is going to also be paying 2 police officers specifically who have domestic violence charges, who are charged with committing this act of domestic violence. And they've been paying them last year too, but they're going to begin to, as this cycle begins, to pay them again. They cover their health insurance, cover their dental insurance. And so again, if the people that are supposed to be upholding and stopping domestic violence, because that's what they that's what the police is one of the things the police go out here and do. If the people who's supposed to be stopping that from happening is perpetuating it, and not only perpetuating it, but getting paid after they are accused with perpetuating it, what type of legitimacy does that institution have? And at the same time, think about the most recent person who was murdered who lost his life to this institution. It was a domestic violence call that was made. It was a domestic issue that was being brought about. And so, again, what type of legitimacy can be had in an institution that will kill a citizen for something that is killed a citizen for being accused of something that it will pay its employee for being accused of? Faustin Guaitigo was murdered for the same thing that multiple police officers from the Rockford Police Department are sitting at home getting paid for being accused of. Faustin Guaitigo hadn't been found guilty, just like those Rockford police officers who getting paid checks hadn't been found guilty. And so what type of legitimacy does that institution have? And so when you look at some of these things from that type of perspective, it lets you understand why this institution cannot keep shootings from happening, why this institution cannot keep domestic violence from happening, why this institution cannot keep the things that are considered crimes in our society from continuing to be perpetuated, because there's no legitimacy in the institution. It's no legitimacy in the institution. And the community is exploited by this institution at the same time. The community is uh, uh, the community is exploited by this institution at the same time. And as in the process of all of these things happening, uh, it, there's never no progress made in the violence that takes place. There's never no progress made when it comes to dealing with drugs that may be getting sold in the area. There's no progress made with any of these things because the institution that is being put to uphold these things has no legitimacy with the people that is being implemented upon. And until one of the other things I want to think is important too is that you have to have a commonality when you're dealing with people from different marginalized groups or different subjugated groups or different oppressed groups, and you need to be able to point them to an overt commonality that they have, to a common interest, a similarity. And that is what policing is. And it's hard for a lot of people to accept that. It's hard for a lot of people to grasp that concept, to grasp that notion. But when you sit down and you look at the facts of the matter when it comes to the institution of policing, specifically here in Rockford, we can look right here in this area. The truth is that the police officers spend more time trying to give people tickets than they spend trying to figure out who did the most recent shooting that took place in the city. The police officers spend more time doling out citations to people than they spend investigating these crimes in the areas where it's high crimes at. You know, and it's the same concept works too with the city. Hold on. Same concept works with the city. We live in a city where there's areas where every year there's the same type of acts of violence that takes place in these areas. These things don't happen in those areas because somehow inherently that area is just cursed with violence happening there. It happens in that area because of the things that this city perpetuates, the oppression, the exploitation, the marginalization, the things that it perpetuates, the things that it exploits. It pushes off and isolates the negative manifestations to communities and to neighborhoods that motherfuckers who don't look like them live in. So they gotta have people inside the jail cell. The jail cell, them jail cells and the jail and the criminal justice system or the criminal punishment system is a source of income. When this year start out with, they got a certain amount of numbers that they got to hit, a certain amount of court cases and court dates and pleas and fines and all of these things that they need to make sure that their books is checked at the beginning of this year. And so they cannot absolve crime. They cannot absolve what they would consider crime or criminal offenses. Their job is to catch people as they commit them. It's to perpetuate and to maintain the circumstances that lead to people committing these crimes, that lead to people doing these acts, and then to just catch them, put them inside the jail, and that's how this system works. And so at the beginning of this year, the Rockford Police Department not sitting up trying to make sure that it's 0 murders or 0 robberies or 0 shootings. They trying to figure out what they got to do to catch the people that's going to do robberies and catch the people that's going to do shootings and catch the people that's going to commit murders. And so once that type of baseline understanding is set, and you know, you might have to struggle with somebody to get to a commonality in that, because that may not be something that everybody is willing to accept or even agree on. And it may be somebody who can articulate some of these things better. I probably could articulate it better at a different point in time, but I just want to, beforehand, before the year start, I just want to go ahead and do things beforehand. That's one of the things I'm getting more comfortable with some of these situations is, even though it may be a hard thing to say before it happened because of the way it may feel looking back on it, it's certain things that's just, until we break these systems, until we break these cycles, that's going to inherently happen. And so as this year start, the Rockford Police Department is going to shoot somebody. They're gonna shoot somebody that's unarmed. That's an unnecessary shooting. Now, whether the person lives or dies, who knows? But it's a statistical fact that that's gonna happen. Somewhere within the area, within this city, within the county, law enforcement is going to murder somebody unnecessarily. Somebody who doesn't need to be murdered. Within this time, the Rockford Police Department is going to lock up and arrest countless people who not supposed to be arrested, or for unjust reasons, or for unlawful reasons, or trump up charges on them. Countless of those people are not going to have enough money to afford any type of legal representation that would be able to fight those charges. So they're going to have to take pleas for those charges. And the pleas that these people take is going to include fines. And a bunch of those fines are built in to what this system needs at the beginning of this year. And so if if Winnebago County need $5 million, and it's just a random number, $5 million to operate, pay all its employees, pay, for the upkeep of the building or whatever, at the beginning of this year, they setting up to make sure they get $5 million worth of fines out of the people who live in Winnebago County. And so that means they need things that's $5 million worth of fine worthy to be happening in Winnebago County. I think that same concept, and I would, challenge people to, throughout this year, and as things happen throughout this year when it comes to the political nature of things, because that's other stuff that's going to happen. It's going to be some crazy stories that come out about some type of politicians or policy or whatever. I would challenge people to not buy into narratives, or to not buy into what mainstream thought is about certain things, and to take time to view things from an informed aspect, and to be okay with saying, you don't know something about something, or taking time to become informed about something. And, I say that particularly because of the way that the news media, and this is here in Rockford, I'm not even talking about like CNN or Fox or nothing like that. Even just like on news stories here, when news stories come out in the comments and when people share things, too often it seems people are manipulated by whatever the media narrative is, or whatever the mainstream narrative is. And I think that as long as that is a case for the amount of people that it is, when we do get to have these moments where we can try to bring about change, or force the status quo to be disrupted in some sense, it's more easily co-opted, or it's more easily subverted by the powers that be, when they know they can just feed a line to 23, or feed a line to 13, or feed a line to 17, and manipulate people into forgetting the roots of these issues, the root causes of these issues. And I know it's difficult when citizens enact when citizens enact violence upon each other, or when a citizen enacts violence upon somebody else, or victimizes somebody else. It's always difficult in that moment to look past the individual action and the decisions that the individual made. And I would never advocate to absolve the individual of responsibility or accountability for their individual actions. But I think that we have to get to a place of also at the same time, and more sternly addressing the institutions and the society that continues to create the situations that lead to these individuals victimizing citizens, and citizens enacting violence upon each other. And as adamant as you are about seeing a shooting happen in a city, and somebody getting killed from a shooting happen in a city, be adamant about the circumstances in our city that continue to lead to these shootings happening, that continue to lead to the hopelessness and the nihilism that exists, where it is so many young people that's being accused of these things. And again, that's a hard thing to do. That's not a simple thing to do. That's not something that you just sit down and do in 1 day or in 2 days or in 3 days. But that's something that it takes time to do, and it starts with understanding that arresting people and throwing people in jail in the way that this system, the way that this city does, and the way that this country does, it does not stop the problem that is. It creates a problem and perpetuates a problem rather than stopping a problem and slowing down a problem and shortening a problem. And once you understand that, you have to also take time to understand how long this has been happening and how extreme and dire the situation is that it's been happening, and understand that when you see somebody being killed, when you see somebody, it's the same way with drunk driving. When you see somebody, when I see somebody's gets in a car accident, they was drunk driving, and somebody dies in a car accident, as much as I understand that this person needs to be held responsible and needs to hold accountability for drinking and driving and leading to somebody else's death, also know that the issue of alcoholism has to be addressed in our society. Also know that beer commercials on every football game and alcohol ads in every music video and alcohol ads and sponsorships and in sports, that all of these things lead to, in bars, the amount of bars that exist, the amount of money that's in the alcohol industry, all of these things also lead to the issue of this person drunk driving on the road. And it's the same way when somebody gets shot. When a shooting happens in the streets, or a shooting happens in a school, or a shooting happens in a workplace, just as much as that individual needs to be held responsible and accountable, the amount of guns that are manufactured in this country, the amount of violence that is embedded inside of this country, the amount of violence that is embedded inside the society, all of those things have to be addressed too, or else it won't matter how much you hold the individual person responsible and accountable. We'll continue to create individuals who do these things. The amount of poverty that exists in this society has to be addressed. That leads to the amount of decisions that people take that are skewed, that have violence involved in them because of the desperation that they have, because of the poverty that exists, the miseducation that exists in our society, how everybody's okay with not taking time to learn something, or how everybody is okay with, that's not, I don't know if I'm accurately saying that, but and so I say all of those things to get to the point of challenge, until we get to a place where we think consciously and actively like that on a regular basis. We will always be manipulated when tragedies happen within our city. These tragedies happen because of the root causes and because of these things that are perpetuated by institutions like the City of Rockford government, by institutions like the Rockford Police Department, by institutions like the Winnebago County Sheriff Deputies and the Winnebago County Jail, by institutions like the Rockford Public School Systems. These are all places where root causes begin at. And as long as the status quo as long as the status quo stays the way it is, and all of these in this city, in this area, and those institutions are not challenged, we will maintain the same amount of violence and the same amount of things that are considered crimes happening, because these institutions are set up to uphold that. We go into 2022, still waiting for the video of Denzel Duvant, who was assaulted last year, to be released to the public. Still waiting for the video of Tyrus Jones, who was shot by Rockford Police Department officer Dominic McNeese in 2020, 2 years ago now, 2 calendar years ago now, to be released to the public. Still having multiple protesters, multiple activists, multiple community members, including myself, facing unjust, unlawful charges and arrest, still facing charges from unjust and unlawful arrests that took place 2 years ago, 2 calendar years ago now. And two, just in general, as a society, as a country, when you think about George Floyd was murdered, I believe it was May 25th, 2020. And it was one of the most brutal, it was horrible video. And think about the amount of things that happened. And think about the situation that existed with COVID and everything at the moment when it existed. And think about the amount of things that happened. And then think about, I think it was December 24th of this year, in Los Angeles, a police officer went into a store, department store, shooting in the department store, killing 2 people, killing a 24-year-old man who had a lock. That's what he had. He had a lock. And killing a 15-year-old girl, I believe. She was 15 or 14, excuse me. With a stray bullet. Holding a assault rifle. And the video's out of this. And so think about the amount of things that happened then, when that happened in that May, when George Floyd was killed in May, and then think about the complete absence of the amount of things that happened when this little girl, when this child was shot, killed. And I think one of the things that's been in some of those most difficult moments like that, when something like that happens or a video like that happens, those are the moments where it's the easiest to be down here, to be right here. Because even though it may be a small action in that exact moment, I know that what I'm doing is taking some type of step to deal with what led to this person being led to this, young lady being killed, this teenager, this child being killed. And it's the same way when these shootings happen here or violence happens here, and it's a citizen, a civilian among civilian. We were almost victims of that type of violence. And again, this is a statement that's easy to say on this side of it after none of us were shot, but we didn't go press charges. And again, this is not me saying nothing about what nobody else should do. I'm not telling nobody else. This is my philosophy. And I want to be very specific about this. Make sure I'm articulating this properly. I'm highly upset that it's highly upset ain't even the right word. I don't got the words to describe the way I feel about almost being shot, about people that I love and care about almost being shot, about that situation as a whole. But I understand that it is no single individual that can be held accountable or held responsible solely for the things and the way that I feel about that shooting, about the shooting that took place, and about the things that happened. That it is a societal issue, that it is a communal issue, that it is a institutional issue, and for us particularly a political issue that is at play, that is bigger than locking up any one person or trying to get retribution or revenge on any one person. And so when I see a shooting, when I see somebody has been killed, or somebody's been shot, or something like that's happened in the city, and I don't, again, not saying something like that in a light way at all. When I see that this type of action has taken place, I'm more upset at the societal issues that exist that continue to perpetuate these type of events happening. That makes it feel as almost if this is inevitable for these type of events happening. I'm upset at the systems that exist that have found ways to let individual people profit, and businesses profit, and institutions profit monetarily and otherwise off of these things happening, off of these violent events taking place. I'm upset by the fact that to adequately and truthfully and genuinely and wholly try to address and absolve the society of some of the root causes that lead to these events taking place, because doing that means that you will cause monetary, cause certain businesses and individuals and people to have a negative monetary gain, or not have no monetary gain, or take a monetary loss, or maybe take a political loss, or take a career loss. The fact that adequately trying to address these issues means that they will deal with those things. That's not something that I like. I think that's a negative thing. I don't like that that's a reality, but that is a reality. It is a reality that it is people, and again, capitalism works in the manner where somebody has to be exploited. And a lot of these issues are dealt and rooted in capitalism or racism. That's one of the things that we seen last year, is that a lot of people were opposed to racism, but they weren't opposed to capitalism. And so the city of Rockford used capitalism as a tool to against people who believed they were anti-racist. They seen that they were more capitalist than they were anti-racist. And so get ready for another year of city market, another year of court. Think about another year of the family of Jovan Fresco still waiting for the trial for the Metro Enforcement agents, Khalil and I think of the other dude's name right now, who murdered Jovan Fresco, who murdered their loved one. Another year waiting for that to take place. Another year of having a high school named after a slaveholder in Thomas Jefferson, after a rapist in Thomas Jefferson, after a man who had 700 plus slaves, raped his slaves, impregnated his slaves, enslaved his children. Another year of a school being named after Abraham Lincoln, who was a racist, who was a colonizer, who said that if he could keep the Union by preserving slavery, he would, and if he could keep the Union by getting rid of slavery, he would. Who signed an Emancipation Proclamation that allowed for multiple states within the Union to continue to have slaves and uphold slavery. Another year of living in a city that clings to having 4th of July celebrations, that clings to that clings to tearing down memorials of people that's been murdered by the police department, people that's been murdered in custody of the jail that's in the city, fining people, another year of them fining people for having these for putting up these memorials, fining people tens of thousands of dollars. Another year where the mayor will continue to ignore these issues as they take place, to ignore when people are shot by the law enforcement in his city, to ignore as people are unjustly arrested in his city, to ignore as, and truthfully, to ignore as any of these issues take place in this city. To come out for casino openings, come out for city market openings, and have press conferences, and every 3 months talk about, do a crime press conference standing next to his new black police chief. But not to adequately address these issues, not to adequately address all domestic violence, because he won't address the domestic violence that the police department perpetuates, not to address all violence that takes place, all shootings that take place in the city, because he won't address the shootings that take place that his police department engage in. If the police are shot at, he will have a press conference and speak about it. But if the police shoot somebody, he won't even put out a statement on Facebook no more about it. That's how far back he's regressed. He went from, on May 3rd, think about this, after George Floyd was murdered, Minneapolis, he had a press conference standing next to a bunch of black people. In the 2 calendar years since, I'm using 2 calendar years kind of loosely, but in the 2 calendar years since, he hasn't even said the name. Or written the name, we should say. He hasn't even written the name of the people who have been shot and killed by the police in his, or even just beat, also brutally assaulted. He hasn't even said their names on his Facebook post, which is all he puts out. He don't have press conferences no more. He put out a Facebook post. He won't even say their names. And so I'm rambling. I'm going on a little bit. I need to go to sleep. And these drunk people finna walk by, so. All right, man. Another year, 2022. I hate to be ominous at the beginning of the year, but it is what it is.
What's up, bro?
What's up?
How's it going? Hey, guys.
Doing all right? Oh, no, I don't. Sorry, man.
Hey, happy fucking New Year, man.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Take it easy. You
For
too.
real.
Have a good day.
Have a wonderful night.
You too. So, rest in power, Demetrius Bennett. Rest in power, Logan Bell. Rest in power, Geno Washington. Rest in power, Mark Barmore. Rest in power, Philip Johnson. Rest in power, Jasper Banks. Rest in power, Jovan Fresco. Rest in power, Suzette Babler. Rest in power, Fausto Guaitigo. Rest in power, Shannon Graves. Rest in power, Lil Mike Sago. Rest in power, Mikey Guzman. Rest in power, Joseph McCormick. Rest in power, Eddie Patterson. We outside. New Year, same mission.